Hello, class. It's Miss Roberts here. Today we're going to talk about culture and intercultural communication. Let's begin. All right. So let's take a deeper dive into this section. We're going to talk about what culture is, how it's influenced by historical events, external environments, how technology helps shape culture, how it's influenced by inherited biological characteristics, and how institutional networks set it apart. All right. So I might be blocking some of the words, so my apologies in advance. But we do have the companion slides on your module. All right. So, how culture is defined? Well, many things can make up culture, but culture is shared. Excuse me. Sorry. Culture is learned and is a shared set of interpretations. It involves beliefs, values, norms, and societal practices, affects behavior, and involves large groups of people. Culture and language are connected. We share our culture through language, and it affects symbolic processes, which affect how people interact and understand one another. Mhm. Excuse me. All right. So let's talk about some ways or some common parts of demographics and culture, right? So sometimes we might view race and ethnicity as the same thing, but here are the main differences. Race refers to certain characteristics and similarities between a group of people, and it's a social contract rather than an innate trait. So, for example, my race is Black, someone of primarily African descent. Um, so, say for instance, I can share racial categories with someone from Latin America and Africa and Europe. Race is just one thing that makes up my demographic makeup. But when we're thinking about or studying culture, we can't just stop at race. We have to take a deeper dive. For example, national origin. So I identify as Black, but I'm African American, right? I am an American Black woman. So I'll give you an example. I had a friend when I lived in Florida who had national origins in Haiti, right? So even though we both identified as Black girls racially, nationally, she was Haitian, I was American. So we had some similar experiences as Black girls, but different cultural experiences because we come from different nations, right? And different ethnicities. So ethnic group refers to variety of groups who share language, history, religion, nation state, and or cultural system. So race is a part of cultural makeup, but so does national affiliation, national origin, or citizenship, and connections to a nation, and or ethnic group, right? And then we have other aspects of culture, like subculture and co-culture. So subculture can be a culture found within a larger culture. But now we like to use the term co-culture because, back in the day when I was in college, we used to say, hey, we have American culture, then we have subcultures, right? So additional cultures that are within American society. But the word co-culture implies that, hey, it's not like a less, like sub or less than, but it's co, like we coexist within America. So it's more inclusive and less hierarchical. So cultures differ for a variety of reasons. Think about your cultural identity as an American, if you're an American. If you are a international student, you can think about how your cultural origin differs with ours, whichever or however you identify as part of the American, as part of American. Think about how cultures are created or why cultures differ. For example, we have history, ecology, so pretty much what's the makeup of the actual landmass, technology, biology, institutional networks, and interpersonal communication patterns. Excuse me. So, with culture and ecology, this includes bodies of water, land formations. Think about the earliest societies. Usually, the large cities formed around bodies of water. Every time I think about that, I think about the Nile River and how that landmass around excuse me, that land mass around the Nile River is considered one of the cradles of civilization and one of many, right? But think about how climate, even in the US, in Southern California, but at the time I'm filming this, it's in February. Although I'm wearing a jacket, I'm not wearing a jacket because it's cold outside. I'm wearing a jacket because it's cold inside. Because we have the air on in February. But if I was in Detroit, my hometown, I would not be wearing this flimsy jacket, right? I'll be wearing a coat going outside. So that impacts your culture and what you do around culture. Excuse me. So, in the book's example, people who live in close climates might build a transportation network with the cold weather in mind. So, it might have an increase in public transportation. So, the book talks about Minneapolis, St. Paul, but I like to think about New York, right? New York has, big, vast city, not a lot of cars as far as like parking spaces, but people have a tendency to take public transportation versus in SoCal. We're warmer, our region is so spread out. And of course, we do have some trains and things that are being built in the pipeline. We have a tendency to go towards cars. Geography can impact culture as well. So, thinking about SoCal again, on I think tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow. As I'm talking about this, I'm filming this on a Thursday. Friday is usually my day to, grade, relax, but also exercise. So, because it'll be in the 70s in February, I get to walk outside. So, in Michigan, if I was still there, I wouldn't be able to do that. So, they said people in warmer regions, warmer climates tend to be more outdoorsy. And I can not scientifically attest that people in the SoCal region are pretty outdoorsy most of the time. All right. So technology. So thinking about technology and how it impacts culture, being from America and also um, being an elder millennial, I have a unique experience having a teenagehood, teenagerdom, teenage experience. I don't know what you call it, but childhood, teenagehood, where we lived in a more analog society. Then we started to lean in towards computers. Then there was dial-up internet, DSL internet, and now we have like Wi-Fi internet. So I was around for all of that. I remember all that, right? I can also remember a time where people didn't have internet. I had a friend that didn't have internet. And because he didn't have internet, there were barriers with him getting his schoolwork done. Now, there still is a digital divide today, but it's being closed, or the gaps are being closed by cell phones and access to cell phones and access to technology. But there still is a gap, not as drastic as it was when I was a younger adult, but being around technology, having access to newest, latest, cutting edge technology does shape culture. Think about countries where they have super advanced technology and super advanced internet. Their internet isn't going out every 5 to 6 business days or anything like that. I'm going through a time where sometimes they'll be like, oh, there's internet outage. So a little bit timely with this particular lecture, but you might have places where it's more remote and they don't have access to that technology. So their whole worldview and access to other people is a little bit different. So something to think about. Ooh, side note. Also AI. So just as a sidebar, because as I'm filming this in February 2026, and I have to put the year there because AI is moving really fast. So access to AI, understanding of AI, how one uses AI is another flavor of this particular digital divide. It's not just like who has internet, but who has access and understanding of AI, right? So that's just my 2 cents, but let's go ahead and move on. Okay, so a lot more things to write about. So excuse me if my face is blocking. We do have the companion PowerPoints on the modules. All right. So biology and institutions. So inherited characteristics that culture member shares with dog. So biology plays about environmental factors. So for example, when we think about race, we think about our ancestry of origin, what we look like is based on our ancestors not reaction, excuse me, adaptations. That's what I'm looking for. Adaptations to the environment. So because I have African ancestry, my skin is darker, my hair is curlier, because my ancestors dealt with a hot climate. So their bodies adapt to that. If you have ancestors with lighter skin, they were in colder climates, their facial features adapted to that environment, their hair adapted to that environment. So when we think about what we think of the social construct in race has, is based in biology as far as like what we look like, right? And one of the things we have to think about in intercultural communication and biology and how institutions treat people based on biology and things like that. It's a complex topic. We will be addressing, or you can address these complex topics in our disparity paper as well. So, as the book talks about, that race in itself is arbitrary and less significant than biology, right? So, we can also think about biology outside of racial factors that can deal with culture. So, for example, what are some of the health profiles of different cultures? We might have communities that might have um, different predispositions. So that's the word, predispositions to different ailments. They can be based on social, cultural influences, based on biology. It's a very complex subject that we necessarily can't imagine to cover necessarily within this class. But when we think of culture, that culture experiences biology and how um, being racialized impacts different people in different ways, is tied in together. And if you want to explore that, you can explore that in the disparity paper in this class. And with institutional networks, they're formal organizations that provide structured societies. So the institutions that we know, think about our legal system, think about our school system, think about any other systems that we are under is definitely culturally based. And if we go to somewhere else, we might have different experiences. One thing that just kind of lives in my mind is the student loan crisis. This does not exist in other countries, but it exists here because we pay to go to school. And sometimes we might need to have student loans to do that. The cost of education is higher. So that's something that culturally, as an American, we understand versus if you go somewhere else, you'd be like, hey, college is free. Like, what? So that's just one example of institutional networks and culture and how it impacts our experience. So next we have intercultural communication. So it's communication as symbolic, interpretive, transactional, contextual processes in which people from different cultures create shared meanings. So the actual messaging of the communication is based on culture. So 3 questions we can ask that lead to a better understanding of intercultural communication. What differences among groups of people constitute cultural differences? How extensive are those differences? And does the extended communication change the effects of cultural differences. So, to what degree does cultural difference impact the communication? So, for example, I am, to my dismay, one of the things on my bucket list is to learn a different language. But to my dismay, I only know English. So I can't talk to as many people. And as a communications studies instructor, that pains me a little bit because I want to talk to everybody. But I can only speak to people who speak English because that's the only language I know. So if I want to speak to someone in another language without Google Translate, it's going to be kind of hard. So that would be an impact language. The language that we speak in of itself impacts the intercultural communication. So that's just one example that popped in my mind. And then we're going to talk about or think about the characteristics present in the communication. So what aspects of people, situation, and communication make the changes intercultural? That can include difference in cultural beliefs, values, points of view, and languages, just like in my example. All right. All right, so that is chapter 2. Just a rundown of what intercultural communication is. Stay tuned for additional chapters. And of course, if you have any questions, let me know. All right. Take care, everyone. Bye.